All right. So once you've modeled everything and you want to render, there's a couple different options you can do. You can go to the rendering menu to see all of the options, which is in this drop-down. And you have render using Maya software. This is for special effects such as toon shaders or glowing lights. Most of you probably don't know all of that yet. The hardware will just show what it looks like in the scene. So hardware shows this. And then Arnold Renderer is going to be the one that's going to do more realistic light. Now, Arnold Renderer will work with the AI materials and with their lights. So to get to their lights, you go to Arnold Lights and select. I did a sky dome because it went all around the area. From there, you can go ahead and test a render. And depending, your render might have some of this fuzz in it. The reason that happens is because it's the way the light is breaking down or actually not getting to the camera when it bounces. And the way to change that is go to the render settings. Under the tab, you have render camera. This is the light that goes into the camera. So if your overall scene is looking muddied, that's where you would adjust the camera. Diffuse is the light that bounces off the object. So if you're getting fuzz when you see it hit your objects, especially your shiny ones, that's where you want to increase diffuse. Specular are those highlight spots. That's when you're getting the shiny white light or those streaks of light. That's going to be specular. Transmission you only need if you're using glass or another transparent texture. So since I have glass here, transmission is the way the light goes in and then goes back out, goes through the object and back out. Subsurface scattering, so I'd actually increase that one, and I'll increase my specular maybe 1. And I'm going to decrease my diffuse to 4. This will increase my rendering time, but it will get rid of a lot of those speckles, hopefully, and make it look better. Subsurface scattering, we're not doing at this point. That's for things like skin or for translucence, where the light breaks down as it goes through. And indirect volume we can increase later, or volume indirect. That's the light that's kind of stray bouncing in the scene from... And I'll get more of an explanation of that later. You just close those and then you can render again. And hopefully what will happen is that you'll see a render with a lot less noise, and we did lose a lot of that noise. We still have a little in here. That background noise, where if it happens in the shadows, sometimes that's also just light not hitting the area enough. So sometimes if you add another light or you increase the intensity of your light, that will solve it. You see that if you go take a picture with your cell phone at night, you'll actually get it broken apart, and that's because there's not enough light to write the image. It's the same thing that happens here if you see that breakdown in the shadows.
Interruption. If the electrician is still in the building, please call 2420. Electrician 2420.
And it's the ARL, so you always get those type of announcements. Now, this will just render a single image for right now, and we'll show you how to change that in a minute. But if you just want your single image, what you can do is File, Save Image, and you need to make sure that this is either a JPEG or a PNG. If you want transparency, it's a PNG. And if you want a JPEG or a not transparent background, that's a not transparent JPEG. Do not default leave on alias pics. I cannot open that. If you get an ALS file, that means that you left it on alias pics. So with JPEG, I would go ahead and save this as final render. I wouldn't put periods in it. And usually I put my name because there's a lot of you. Now, if you want to render a movie, there are 4 things you need to remember in this render setting, besides actually picking your correct render. You need to give it a name. You need to give it a file type, so JPEG. You also need to change this from single frame to extension. And you need to tell it the start and end frames. So I have this as 200. These are the 4 that you have to change. The rest of them can be left. Later on, if you want to increase the quality, maybe to like a full HD render, or if you're ever rendering out a still image, you can do that here. But for right now, we don't need to change that. Then you close. Now, if you were doing a Maya software, you can render with batch render, which we'll do it in the background. But if I do that with Arnold, it shows up with a watermark. So you have to go to render sequence, and you'll notice each picture flash on your screen. If you don't notice this window opening up, or it's missing some options, and actually this is something every student needs to know because it's been happening a lot this year. If you're ever missing buttons, if you're missing your text, or if the window just won't open, that's actually an account issue, and we need to delete the profile on your computer so that you can restart. As long as you're saving everything in the D drive, it will not delete your files, but you do need to do that. Once that's finished, or if you want to cancel a render, you can always cancel a render with escape. You need to put this somewhere else. And if you don't know where your file is saved, you can always go to Set Project. That will tell you where it's saving everything right now. From there, we put them together using Premiere. And if a video or anything opens, especially for those of you that switch computers, you just skip that. You'll do a new project. Name it something like table setting together. And make sure it's saving to your D drive and hit OK. And then the way you get your file is File, Import. You'll have a set with numbers on them. You will click on it and click Image Sequence. Do not select all of them. Don't do a Shift select, or else you have to edit the whole thing by hand. You don't want to do that. That'll mean like hand cutting 200 images down to 1 frame each. You don't want to do that. You click the first image, you hit Image Sequence and open. So once you have this, you could double click it if you want it to open in the source window to view it. See, it says source right there. And I can also just drag this over to put it in my timeline. Then to turn it in, I go to File, Export, Media. In File, Export, Media, I want to make sure the format is set to H.264. I cannot ever see a Premiere Pro document. I will just get error messages. And then you want to click on the output name. It should be this blue area. That's how you can tell where it's saving. From there, once you make sure that this is saving in your D drive and that you've selected H.264, you hit Export. And it will once again render, although this time much shorter. And remember, rendering is only because when we look at our project, our computer is not a supercomputer. It cannot show the objects and the lighting and the materials at full quality without basically crashing every time it tries. There are things that can do full quality render, and as you guys go further in your career, you'll be able to do more and more without rendering. But for right now, to keep this moving